Act request over the last 30 or 40 years. Over half of them were released under 4 years of Jimmy Carter.
These newly declassified documents were sourced from numerous agencies. They contain information about many UFO sightings and the military responses. Access to the declassified material continues to bolster UFO research.
We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow. And let there be no misunderstanding. We are going to begin to act.
There are reports that Ronald Reagan had 2 UFO experiences prior to serving as president. The story of his first sighting reached the public through the memoirs of actress Lucille Ball. She recalled that Reagan and wife Nancy arrived late to a Hollywood party.
And she stated that when Mr. Reagan and Nancy arrived at the party, they were all excited. They told everybody about this sighting, that this thing they had seen it coming down the coast. They had watched this whole thing.
Ronald Reagan was very interested in the topic of UFOs, privately, very much so. And indeed, has been said to have seen one while flying on an aircraft as governor of California. Apparently a very interesting sighting.
Allegedly, Reagan saw a white light zigzagging alongside his aircraft. He stepped into the cockpit and told the pilot to follow it.
His pilot had 30,000 hours as a pilot, which is an incredible number. And the whole plane load of them saw this thing.
They reportedly chased the mysterious light for several minutes until it shot skyward out of sight. Could these alleged sightings have fueled Reagan's repeated references to UFOs and alien life during his presidency? February 11th, 1988, in a speech called Remarks at the Annual Conservative Political Action Conference Dinner, Reagan said,
"Our unshakable, root-deep, all-encompassing skepticism about the capital city's answer to the UFO, that bizarre, ever-tottering but ever-flickering saucer in the sky called the prevailing Washington wisdom."
A presidential speech is a very complex thing. It has many drafts. It has people who proof every word as to whether every word is accurate in their figures, facts. It's a very long and involved process. There's up to 25 agencies who have to sign off, State Department. Everybody gets to put their little 2 cents in, what they want taken out. So I started checking the speeches, and I went through every Ronald Reagan speech that had this alien invasion.
Reagan asked his speechwriters to address the alien UFO subject.
He believed that if we were invaded by people from another planet, that the world would come together, the world would unite. He called it his fantasy.
One of the more compelling exchanges was between speechwriter Rhett Dawson, who sought to keep the fantasy out of Reagan's speeches and away from the commander-in-chief. The discussion preceded President Reagan's address to the 1987 UN General Assembly.
There's a memo that comes from the speechwriter that says, "Mr. Reagan, this is your speech, and go over it and let me know." And he noticed that this particular item about the alien invasion had been removed.
The president responded with a handwritten demand scribbled on the memo.
And on the bottom, in Reagan's handwriting, Reagan says, "There's too much anti-Soviet stuff in here. I want you back away from this. And, oh, by the way, could you put my fantasy back in, how the world would unite if faced with creatures from another planet?" And he used the word creatures.
Clearly grasping the president's determination, Dawson rewrote the speech, and during the 42nd General Assembly of the United Nations on September 21st, 1987, Reagan said,
"Our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?"
When we return, are some presidents in the know about UFO files while others are not?
And the reason is simple. You're more apt to see a UFO than you are his plan.
UFO researchers insist that George Herbert Bush is the key to present-day UFO knowledge.
George Bush Sr., I think, is one of the key presidents when it comes to ufology. He's a very important president because he has always been believed by a lot of researchers to be a guy who knows what's going on. He was former CIA director under President Ford. He was vice president under Ronald Reagan for 8 years, would have gotten briefings on many issues, including UFOs. He was trusted by the military. He was trusted mostly by the intelligence community. In fact, now they've actually named a building at the CIA headquarters after George Bush.
Herbert Walker Bush, when he was in his earlier days, had served as chief of the CIA. Now, some people think in that capacity he was bound to have known about what was going on ufologically at the agency. If he did, it still probably won't ever be disclosed until after he's long gone, just like the other president. People did write to the agency, by the way, probably when he was serving there. They would send Freedom of Information requests to the agency for any UFO material in its possession, say 900 pages worth and counting. They claim they no longer look into the subject, but how many Americans today are going to accept out of hand such a claim as that?
However, little evidence can actually link President Bush to UFOs.
For example, when I wrote the Bush Library, I asked them about UFO documents. They said they only had one UFO document.
And there are no public documents linking George Bush Sr. to UFOs, but I think there's very little doubt in any researcher's mind that this man knew a lot about the topic.
The answer may lie beneath some of the most heavily blacked out government documents, recently declassified from a number of military agencies. To many UFO researchers, George H. Bush and members of his staff, including Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, was the power team who kept the UFO files closely guarded within military and intelligence circles.
George Bush is a man who, by all accounts, knows a lot of what's going on in, let's call it, the secret world. That is the world behind the presidency, the world of real power and wealth.
He's a guy that behind the scenes, he's got oil money, all the right connections, and if you want to know what's going on, George Bush will know what's going on. He's the guy.
As far as I know, an alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947.
William Jefferson Clinton's presidential archives contain extensive records pertaining to UFOs, from Roswell to alleged close encounters.
I would say that if UFOs are cards, Clinton is the royal flush. I mean, Clinton was into UFOs big time. The Clintons have said that the library in Little Rock has got a lot of windows, it's got a lot of glass, because they wanted to show that it was an open administration. It's just a gold mine for a researcher.
I think Clinton, on the one hand, did more than any other president to get classified material declassified. And he did more to open up government disclosure than any other president, as far as I know.
Bill Clinton is another president who had a publicly stated interest in the topic of UFOs and wasn't afraid to say so from time to time publicly.
He would talk about Social Security.
I mean, I saw a survey the other day that said that a lot of people in their 20s thought it was more likely that they would see a UFO than that they would ever draw Social Security.
So, of course, every time they're trying to push Social Security, the president, they go to this little funny thing that they stick in the speech. And Clinton used it 8 times.